Good morning and welcome to our webinar. I'm John Williams. I'm the Dean of the Law School at the University of Adelaide, and this is my colleague Paul Babie.
Hello.
We'd just like to say a few things about the University of Adelaide, our law school, and then give you some information and answer a few questions that you may have about us. This webinar is being recorded, and for those who are not live, there's opportunities to speak to our consultant, which is KOM, our Canadian rep, and you can directly contact them on their toll-free number 1877 318 8203, or just email them on info@comconsultants.com. All that information you've probably got already from the website. So let me give you a brief outline of our law school and the University of Adelaide in general. Our law school is the second oldest law school in Australia. It's 1883. And we are one of the oldest common law schools in the world. By the rankings, and you'll see some of the ranking documentation we give you, we rank in the top 100 law schools in the world. Our graduates are everywhere. They're members of the senior profession, they're judges. We've educated premiers, Supreme Court judges, and the current Prime Minister is one of our graduates. The university is in Adelaide, which is a city of 1.1 million people. It's coming up to St Patrick's Day, so things will be happening in town, but it's a beautiful 28 degrees there, so the contrast with Canada couldn't be more bracing. It's a great time to be in Adelaide at the moment. The festivals are on. There's the Adelaide Festival, the World Music Festival, the Fringe Festivals. The place is really buzzing. The Writers' Festival, and the university is just starting. The Australian academic year runs from February to November, December, so it's a calendar year. The university is, as we said, in the heart of the city. It's a campus in the city. It's an old campus. When you go online and have a look, you'll see that it's a campus which has some very impressive facilities and a large sandstone presence in town. We've decided that we'd like to have some Canadians to broaden out our overseas contingent at the law school. The law school has about 1,400 to 1,500 students, and to that end we've decided to have about 20 to 25 seats set aside for Canadians. It's fair to say that getting into your law school in Australia for Australians is as difficult as it is for Canadians getting into a Canadian law school. So in putting aside this quota for Canadians, we've decided that those Canadians will be a pool amongst themselves. And so in terms of entry, I'll leave it to Paul, but we're thinking it to be competitive into that area, you'd need a GPA of around 3 to 3.2. But again, that will depend to a degree upon how many people are placing in it. The program we offer is an accredited degree with our accreditation agencies, which is essentially the admitting authority in Australia. And you'll see how Paul will tell you very soon about how you can take your degree from Adelaide and bring it back to Canada to work. The law school has a great group of faculty with outreach into specialties in international law, property law, into public law. We have internships, training opportunities, as well as the general life of a law school in a city, which is a vibrant and great place to live. If you think about the cost of living, Adelaide was recently assessed as the most livable city in Adelaide. Adelaide would have a cost of living around Hamilton. Sydney and Melbourne would sit into your Toronto and Vancouver prices. So South Australia is a very livable place to be, and it's why we've made it our home. But I'd like to hand over to my colleague Paul, and as soon as you hear him, you'll realise that he has an affinity with Canada. Paul.
Thanks very much, John. Right, so I'm originally from Canada, but I've been at the University of Adelaide Law School. This is my 15th year now in Adelaide. What I wanted to do is just talk a little bit about the application and admission process, a little bit about the returning to Canada, which is a question that obviously any Canadian student that's applying to any overseas law school is going to have. How can I take that qualification back to Canada in order to practice law? And then I'll just say a few words about accommodation in Adelaide at the end. So as John has already mentioned, the admission process, or what we're looking for in terms of admission to the program for Canadian students, there'll be 20 spots put aside for Canadians. Within that pool of Canadian applicants, we're looking for a GPA of around 3 to 3.2, so somewhere in the 75% range. We feel confident that people that apply that have those sorts of results will certainly be competitive within the pool of 20 Canadian seats. We're also offering $5,000 startup scholarships for Canadians, and when you apply for the program at the Adelaide Law School, you'll also automatically be applying for the scholarship. And as part of that process, you'll be able to use or write a personal statement. So if there are any sort of discrepancies or anomalies in your academic record that you want to explain to us, please do use that opportunity to explain that to us, and we will take account of the whole picture of your academic background. So in terms of GPA 3 to 3.2, 75%, you can talk about your academic background. But the really important factor, the really big thing to note about our law school, as with other Australian law schools, is that there is no requirement to write the LSAT. We do not need you to supply us with an LSAT score in order to gain admission to the Adelaide Law School, and that is consistent with other Australian law schools as well. As many of you will know, the LSAT is an American invention in the 1960s and 70s, and it was adopted in Canada sometime after that, but it has never really taken off anywhere else in the world, in the common law world certainly, and certainly not in Australia. So that's a point to note for any applicants coming here from Canada. We do not require. So that's a little bit about the admission or the application and admission process. And I should just say, in terms of the application process itself, our consultants, as John has mentioned, KOM Consultants here in Ontario, will assist you with the application process. And as John has mentioned, we'll be able to give a quick turnaround once you've submitted an application, and we have a rolling application process, so you can apply at any time of the year up until January 15th of the year that you'd be starting in. So as John has mentioned, we start in February, so to take 2014 as an example, you can apply today if you wanted to, up until January 15th of 2014, and we'll be able to give you an answer within 3 to 4 weeks as to the outcome of your application. So we'd be happy to receive applications from you at any time, and you will receive an outcome within 3 to 4 weeks of submitting that application. So that's the application and admission process. In terms of returning to Canada, this is something obviously that anybody that's studying outside of Canada will need to be aware of. If you've studied in a common law jurisdiction, such as Australia and such as the University of Adelaide Law School is a common law school. It's one of the oldest in the world. If you studied at that sort of an institution, then when you return to Canada, you will need to make application to the Federation of Canadian Law Societies and their committee, which is known as the National Committee on Accreditation. That body does not accredit institutions, it accredits individuals. So it cannot say that any law school has an accredited degree, but if you've received a law degree from a particular institution, then you will submit course descriptions and other information that is required by the National Committee on Accreditation, or the NCA. They will assess that. And then typically what they will do for somebody that studied in a common law jurisdiction will say that you have qualified on everything save 4, which is soon to become 5 subjects, which you will need to make up. Now, people can make up those 5 subjects in 2 different ways. One is those 5 subjects can be taken at a Canadian law school on your return. Not many people actually take that approach. They take the second approach, which is to write the 5 exams, which are administered by the NCA at various times throughout the year. And once they've completed those exams, they are in the position of any other Canadian graduate from a Canadian law school. They can simply then enroll for the articling process in whatever province it is that they're seeking admission to, and then article, get admitted to the bar, and then practice law as any Canadian graduate. Those exams and that process may take up to 6 months, but no more than 6 months would be added on to your total study time. So it's not a great deal longer than what a Canadian graduate would have to do in terms of study in order to be qualified to article in a given with a given provincial law society. So that's application, admission, and return to Canada. And the final thing I just wanted to mention very briefly is that there are a range of accommodation options if you are going to be studying with us, and we hope that you will. As I say, there's a range of options, and there is a centralized accommodation service center at the University of Adelaide, which will be happy to assist you with that. But more pertinently, you'll be able to seek the assistance of KOM Consultants, with the accommodation issue as well, and they will help to guide you through that process. So the KOM will assist you with the application, and they'll assist you with the accommodation process as well. So I'll hand it back to John.
Yes, and we've got a couple of questions coming already, and we'll try and answer those. So the first question was, what streams do we offer in our law degree? Is there a corporate or a criminal stream? It's a good question. The Australian degrees are regulated by the admitting authorities, which is essentially the judiciary, senior members of the profession. There are 11 compulsory subjects. So criminal law is a compulsory, corporate law is a compulsory, property, constitutional law. These are all compulsory subjects that everybody does as their degree. So they're standardised in that sense. Then our degree then offers, depending, about 7, 8 subjects as electives. And it's at that point people try and specialise. So if you're interested is corporate law, then there are a number of subjects on insolvencies and shareholder rights and other areas where you could specialise. Criminal law is similar. There's work to be done on electives in selective issues in criminal law. So you can specialise your degree. If you want to become an international lawyer, you can play that strength. If you want to become a property lawyer, there's additional subjects in that area, and advanced constitutional law. So how do you tailor your degree? Well, you take the basic compulsory subjects and then use the electives to place it on. So that's the way that an Australian degree works. And I think it's not dissimilar to many Canadian degrees in that sense. Sure. There's a second question about scholarships.
All right, so the question is, do all Canadians receive a scholarship? And is there only one intake in terms of the admission application? Deal with that second question first. There's not just one intake. I mean, we have a rolling admissions process. So, as I say, you could apply today, the 15th of March, through KOM Consultants, and by the 15th of April, we would have an answer for you as to whether or not you're admitted into the program. That would be for February 2014. And so we can take an application at any time throughout the year up until January 15th of the year in which you're seeking admission. So it's not just one intake or admission process. It's a rolling process, but there is only one start date for the LLB program at the University of Adelaide. So it would have to start in February, near the end of February of any given year. That's when our program starts. So I hope that answers the question in terms of the application admission process, and then when you would begin the degree itself. It would be in February of whatever year it is that you would be starting with us. Do all Canadians receive a scholarship? At the moment, we have 10 scholarships available. So depending on the competitiveness of a pool in any given year, a pool of applicants in any given year, that is what will determine how many scholarships are out. But if we have sufficient number of applicants, we would be awarding 10 scholarships a year, depending on the number of applicants.
I think probably if you were to apply today, just take that date as a random, we'd probably give you an indication of whether you'd be getting a scholarship. We'd try and do the things in a two-track basis. So the $5,000 one-off startup scholarship would probably be able to give you an indication relatively quickly on that as well. So the two issues will run simultaneously.
Right.
Another question?
Right. So the question is, if my GPA is below the cutoff, would you consider LSAT scores? Look, what we're saying to people is we don't need you to take an LSAT, and we wouldn't really be looking at that. So if your LSAT score was particularly good or particularly, below what might be expected with Canadian law schools, that's not really going to matter to us. What you can explain, though, is any anomalies or discrepancies in your academic record. So if there are reasons why, earlier in your degree, just starting out, marks aren't so good, but the marks are sort of improving over time, then by all means do please take the personal statement area of the application to explain that, and we will take that into account. So if you are below the cutoff, don't feel that it's not a cutoff, put it that way. 3.0 is not the cutoff. That's just simply, we're saying that's an indicative range for what we think is the competitive range. But somebody that's below that, we would still encourage you to apply and explain whatever discrepancies might have arisen in relation to your background.
I mean, this is not uncommon for Australian students who have hiccups in their academic career. They You know, they have health issues. They have the adjustment to university may be slower or greater for them. I think what we want to see is a solid record of an ability to complete the degree, and we don't want to set anyone up for failure. Law is a challenging degree, but I think often the challenge is to get into law school. I think once people are in the groove, they do pretty well. I have another question. Any school holidays? How does school year work? Well, the good thing about, I suppose, is that we've just coming out of summer. So the academic year usually starts the end of February. Usually it's the last week of February, first week of March is when the academic year starts. O week, orientation week, is usually the last week of February. Then there's a 12-week semester. Now in the middle of that semester there's a 2-week break. It's usually where people are doing their assignments, and that will take you to about June.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have our winter, you might recall, so there's usually about a 6-week break there between. And by winter, I should say, in Adelaide, it doesn't ever get to freezing. It never snows. It's warm. Then you go from July till about November, where your final exams are, and then it's coming into summer. So it's a beautiful time of the year. So you could come home to Canada in January, or sorry, in December, to sort of get that bracing winter, and then come back to the Australian summer.
That's right. And just one final point is that also in the second semester, the same thing that John was mentioning for the first semester, there's again a break in the middle of that second semester, which is a 12-week semester as well. So we have 2 12-week semesters.
With about a 6-week break, 6 and then a break, then 6 again.
Right, so it's usually around the middle. You've done 6 weeks, then you have a 2-week break, and then tuition, right. So we've had a question about tuition. So the tuition fees will be somewhere between $20,000 and $24,000, depending on the student per annum. So that's consistent with certainly some Canadian law schools, University of Toronto, Queen's University, I believe. That's consistent. There are some Canadian law schools, of course, that are a little bit lower than that, but that's certainly in the ballpark of where the Canadian law schools have set the fees. So we're competitive, and the Australian dollar, of course, at this time is almost on par with the Canadian dollar. It's about the same in terms of tuition, given the exchange rate on the dollar.
A very important question has just come in, Paul, and that is, are you close to a beach?
Yes.
The University of Adelaide, the law school is in the centre of town, so I encourage you to go on and have a look. There's a tram that runs from the centre of town to Glenelg Beach, which is 20 minutes.
Yes, that's right.
So South Australia has beach frontage. It is a university, not the university I should say, but the city goes onto the hills at one end and the beach at the other. So it's possible to live in a beachside suburb and take a 20-minute bus or tram into work to study. Students usually live around midpoint, usually between the beach and the city. So where I live, it's a 15-minute car ride to the beach.
I mean, Adelaide itself is situated there, as John was saying. There are hills to the east and the south of Adelaide, so those are about 30 minutes away, and there's some beautiful wine regions in that area. And then to the west of the city, about, as John said, a 20-minute tram ride to the beaches, and there are beaches all along the western sort of side of Adelaide, all the way up the Gulf St. Vincent. So there's beautiful beaches for hundreds of kilometers, really. But certainly in Adelaide, Glenelg, Brighton, Grange, Semaphore, there are beaches all the way along there. So it's really quite lovely. And then, of course, Adelaide is also the gateway to the north and the outback. So you have all of the different experiences that one would expect in Australia are all in that close proximity to Adelaide and to the Adelaide Law School.
Yeah, so I guess what we're saying, it's a very lovely city, and it's a city where there's vibrance. I mean, today, as I said, there's a whole festival going on at the moment. You could not, the whole of March is a difficult time because there's events every night, free events, paid events, comedy events. It's a very busy time of the year.
That's right. The next question is, can I article in Australia after completing the program, and can I stay and practice in Australia? John, you might.
Look, it is, so you'll have an Australian degree, and then to order to practice, it's a bit like passing the bar. There's a 6-month course called a graduate diploma in legal practice. Yes, you can do it. We have overseas students doing that already. That gives them a right to practice. They can be admitted into any jurisdiction then in Australia by mutual recognition. Now, do people stay on and work? Well, in fact, we have one of our Canadians now has just picked up articles with a very good law firm in Adelaide. She's currently in Hong Kong. They've sent her there for some of her time. And yes, that is the case. A lot of our overseas students try and get jobs. Of course, there's some visa issues which they have to take up. They'll have to have a sponsor, but it is possible to continue. And I fear to say that a lot of Canadians, when they come to Australia, never come back, or if they do, they end up making a decision to live between two countries.
That's right. Is it cheap to fly to other cities during holidays? I would love to see as much of the country as possible. The answer to that is simple. Yes, it is relatively inexpensive. There are a couple of airlines, certainly there are budget airlines that operate within Australia, that would make it possible for you to see, go further afield in terms of the sorts of things that you might think about Australia that come first to mind. So the Great Barrier Reef, Uluru, the centre of Australia, Sydney, of course, the harbour in Sydney. So all of those sorts of things are close to hand in terms of air travel, and the air travel itself is relatively inexpensive. So yes, it is possible during the break times for students to see as much of Australia as they would like to venture to see.
Yeah, and we encourage that. In fact, that's a common thing. A lot of our overseas students, they want to get in touch with the Australian culture, then they want to see Australian native animals, kangaroos, etc., and then they want to grab on the cheap budget airlines. And yes, an hour and 20 minutes you're in Melbourne, hour and a half or you're in Sydney. These airlines are like all these airlines. They're constantly having sales, and you should grab those. But now, one thing, Paul, if there's any other questions, we'll just wait for.
Right.
I said before we were ranked in the top 100. Where would that place us, say in a Canadian context?
Yes, so as John said, we are ranked in the top 100 law schools in the world on the QS World Ranking of Universities, and there's a subcategory in that ranking of law schools. In the law school ranking, we're ranked in the top 100. If you were to compare us to the Canadian law schools that are ranked in the similar range to us, that would compare to Osgoode Hall Law School and the University of Alberta Law School. So we'd encourage you to have a look at those rankings. You can get that information from KOM Consultants, and those rankings will give you an indication of where we stand in terms of other Australian law schools and also of other Canadian. And we're confident that when you see the rankings, you will see that we are clearly one of the more prestigious law schools, not just in Australia, but also in the world.
One of the questions that's come in about is the private accommodation in campus. We'd encourage you to go and have a look at the university's accommodation office. Yes, there is private accommodation. So there's a whole range. There's collegial accommodation. There's a sort of a I wouldn't say collegial, but a semi-detached sort of approach where the university owns a place called The Village, where you can have accommodation there. And then there's student accommodation in the private rental market, and there is accommodation nearby. We're in the city. People usually then get accommodation in a private rental market on a bus route or a tram route that comes into town. So it's usually a cheaper option. You have to pay in gas and electricity and all the other things. But again, the accommodation office can be able to help you to do that.
And KOM Consultants will also assist you with the accommodation options that are available in Adelaide and specifically with the University of Adelaide. So please do get in touch with them if you have specific questions about what accommodation options in Adelaide.
So one of the things we're very pleased with these webinars. It's a chance for us to speak to you and to hear comments from you. We've decided when we get back to Australia, we'll do a couple more of these webinars. Possibly bring in a few other academics and maybe a few Canadians who are already there, and let you ask questions of them, which might be a way of giving you another insight into what it is like in Adelaide and in Australia.
Right, and another question has just come up actually, and that relates to making use of Canadian student loans when studying in Australia or indeed overseas, i.e. outside of Canada. And that is possible. That's possible through your provincial student loan programs. And what we'd ask you to do is, again, get in touch with KOM Consultants and also your own provincial student loan departments, and they can give you further information. But it certainly is possible to apply some Canadian provincial student loan programs to the fees that you're paying for studying overseas. So it is possible. The extent to which it is possible will be available from the provincial student loan departments, and KOM Consultants can help you with that as well.
If I know there's maybe some more questions coming in.
Yeah.
I guess one other thing we're finding is that our students, it's a good cohort of our students. We're very pleased with we've got a relatively young faculty now, and there's exciting things happening all the time. Last year alone, we had students who were involved in mooting that went around the world and other places. We had students involved with internships that are involved. We've got the Law Reform Institute is based at the law school, so we have students involved in that. Paul's area, there's a research unit looking at the role of law and religion in society, which is itself generating some debate. And there's all the extracurricular activities. I would really encourage anyone who comes to university, not just our university, to throw themselves in deep into the law society, student societies, and get involved in the competitions, get involved in the social activities as well as the studying activities. And it's a very vibrant university, and I think because we're so central in the city, you just can't help but be the art galleries next door, the botanic gardens next door, and then all the nightlife is.
Final thing maybe to add to that is also that the people that are on faculty at the Adelaide Law School are all amongst the leaders in their various disciplinary areas, not just within Australia but also internationally. So if you're studying with us, you will be learning from some of the leaders internationally and in Australia in all of the different areas of law that you'll be studying. So you really will be getting a world-class education, legal education at the Adelaide Law School. John says a vibrant and exciting scholarly community amongst our academics. So we really are confident that you'll be getting an education that's really second to none at the Adelaide Law School. We do have a couple of other questions coming in. How many subjects do you take each year and total in the degree? So I guess that's maybe you might.
Well, each semester is 12 units.
Yeah.
And so that they're 3-unit subjects, so that gives you some sort of idea of how many. So you'll do 24 units a year, and the holder degree would be a 3-year degree if you have a degree, and it would be a 4-year degree if you're sort of starting today without finishing your degree. So you can say it's a 3-year degree with 4 subjects a semester, 2 subjects a year. And so the 11 compulsories were usually done in the first year and a half, and then there's electives.
And then there's a question about how many students enroll in the program each year, including Australian students. So the one thing that you need to know about that is that for most Australians, they would come out of school, high school, into the university and into law school, and they would do a 5-year, what's known as a combined degree, and they would get some other degree. So usually a Bachelor of Arts, maybe a Bachelor of Science. It can be, there's a lot of different combined degree programs that can be done by Australians with the law school. So they, just to take one example, somebody might after 5 years would come out with a BA and an LLB. So given that it is essentially a 5-year program for most Australians, there are about 300 students a year that enter into the program, and that would include Australians and other international students as well. So in total, there are about 1,500 students, maybe a little bit more, but that's roughly the number in total at any one time in the law school, about 1,500, about 300 per year in a 5-year program.
If there's no more questions, we can.
Well, the one thing we can say is that if you do have any further questions, you can certainly get in touch with KOM Consultants, or you can get in touch with me, Paul Babie, and KOM again would be happy to give you my contact details so that you can contact directly with me, and either KOM or I would be very happy to answer any questions that you might have that we haven't been able to deal with today in the webinar. But I think we've covered pretty well everything that you need to know about us.
That's true, and most of you would have seen our brochure, which I've been putting around. So you've collected that. That has a lot of the details in there, and I'd encourage you to get that if you haven't. There's, I can see one last question. Can I fast track through summer classes? We do have some summer and winter courses, so you can pick up some of your electives. They're generally not the core subjects, because I think we have a view that some of the core subjects require you to sort of synthesize the material and would run the full 12 weeks. But there's a summer course on writers. We've just finished summer courses right now. In fact, there's some advanced subjects that I know are happening at the moment. So we do have summer courses, so you could pick up a few subjects along the way, and maybe your degree might be 6 months shorter if you did it that way. Look, if there's no other questions, we probably will end there. I'll wait for a moment to see if anything comes through. But I think that Paul's made the point. If you have any questions, just email him directly, or KOM Consultants. One of the things that's been quite clear to me as we've travelled around and spoken to a lot of Canadian students is that the enthusiasm about studying law, but also the ability to study law, is quite clear. I mean, I find people, by just talking to them, you're obviously impressive individuals, and I have no doubt that law is not an easy course. It's a language rich, it's difficult, but it should be difficult. You want to come out with the professional skills and the ability to analyse problems in a way that until this point you probably haven't needed to consider that. But I am sure that many of the Canadians we've seen will be great individuals and people who we could clearly have would welcome to our law school. And as I said, we want to have a small cohort of Canadians, enough so that you have your own support, but not so much that you're not getting an Australian experience. And I think that's important in getting that balance that you want to be able to understand us, at least what we're saying, by the end of it.
The final thing to add, we will be back again in September for another tour of Canada. So we'll be visiting most of the campuses that we visited this time. That is in Ontario, and certainly in Western Canada as well, and British Columbia. So we'll be back at that time. So if anybody would like to make an appointment to meet with me when we're back in September, or if somebody hasn't met with us yet to meet us for the first time, we'd be happy to do that in September. And also we'll be having an ongoing webinar series from Australia, and we'll probably do a couple of those per year. And we'll, as John was saying, talk to some staff members and some students so that you can learn more about the school that way. So we hope that by us being here in September and our ongoing webinar series, we'll be able to you and hopefully receive an application from you to come and study with us.
So, well, thank you very much, everybody. I don't think there's any other questions coming in. All I can say is have a good St. Patrick's Day, and I'm heading back to Australia soon, so I'll thaw out. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Take care.